Hello and welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we turn today's current affairs into clear, exam-ready insights for UPSC. It's May 1st, 2026, and today's edition ties in closely with International Labour Day, bringing two important themes for your mains preparation. Firstly, we begin with India's workforce without a floor, a reality check on wages, informalization, and the gaps in labour protection. Next, we examine the Supreme Court's direction to amend the Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act, exploring issues of reproductive rights, legal reform, and access to healthcare. We will also wrap up the session with prelims pointers for upcoming prelims 2026 examination on May 24th. So let's begin. The newspapers on May 1st are always special because they discuss about the various issues which are faced by the Indian workforce and also the workforce internationally. But here today we are going to focus from absolute basics. We will focus on the Trade Union Act of 1926. We will try to trace the origin of the labor movements from the past to the present times and try to reflect upon the new challenges, also reflect upon the reforms which were proposed by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. And right now we are also going to touch upon the issues of the labor codes, the gig economy, the Noida wage protests, and the industrial accidents, all of the things which are related to the workforce of our country. So that is where, from the perspective of mostly all of the GS papers from 1, 2, 3 and 4, we are going to touch upon the topics of modern history, social issues, social justice. We are also talking about inclusive growth and finally applied ethics in industry labor topics in your GS4 paper. So right now let us start from absolute basic as to understanding why the labor of the entire world need protection in the first place. All of us know that in 1867, Karl Marx came up with his seminal work known as Das Kapital. Now in here, he proposed that the profits which are earned by the capitalists are nothing but the exploitation of the labor, because the capitalists, they actually devise all the policies, they try to implement them, and the ground level, it will be the workers who will be working overtime, who will not be given any holidays, who will not be given minimum wages, and just that will be going as profits in the pockets of the entrepreneurs or the capitalists in general. And that is exactly what is the basic background of the International Labour Day. It tries to give dignity, recognition and value to the workforce and the labor movement and the struggle for workers' right internationally. It is not only an Indian day or an event to be celebrated. In fact, it originated way back in May 4th, 1886. In US, in Chicago, a lot of workers were facing exploitation. For example, they were working in 12 to 16-hour shifts without holiday. Child employment also being used at factories, and also they are not getting any safety measures. So on a fine day, the workers tried to gather and go on strike. They started protesting peacefully, and at the end of the day, the police cracked down. Also, there was supposedly a bomb which went up during the protest. So the police opened fire and killed many of the protesters, and most of the protesters, they were common working men and also women and also children who were at the protest. Now after this police brutality, the laborers of the local areas, they published various posters, pamphlets, spreading the mass movement that would be displayed against the police brutalities. And that is where, in 1867, after Karl Marx published his Das Kapital, there was a growing awareness between various economists, policymakers, and mostly common working men that they need to organize in an organized manner. And that is why this kind of protests were going on. And after around 3 years, in 1889, for the first time, 1st May was declared as an International Labour Day. And this is where in India we celebrated International Labour Day for the first time in 1923. It is very important for your prelims, and it was actually celebrated in Madras, the present day Chennai, and there M.S. Chettiar became the first Indian to organize this event in India. and not only in India but in Asia itself. And that is why you see that he has actually a lot of respect among the working class of the country. And also, when we talk about the labor movements, the labor rights, there are actually three dimensions that we have to talk about. In a free market, we see that we have exploitation. In free market, everything is matched by demand and supply. But what about the social cost of labor? The number of overwork that they do, the number of children that work in factories, loss of protection for women. And that is where wage protection, physical safety, and collective power, that is right to organize, strikes, form collective unions, and these are actually the three dimensions that also we can trace back to our constitution. Because our constitution in article 19 1 subclause C is trying to say that, okay, we have a fundamental right as citizens to form associations or unions, right? And that is actually the basis of the trade union concept in India, right? Also, when we go on to the other kind of fundamental rights, such as Article 23 and 24, here we are talking about forced labor and child labor being respectively restricted in the country. And that is why you have seen that in the past we have had the People's Union for Democratic Rights 1982 Supreme Court case also talking about forced labor. Also, when we talk about the Child Labor Act, it has its origin in this fundamental right itself. Apart from that, we have so many DPSPs, if you can see. For example, DPSP, which is trying to encourage the government of India or the respective state governments to ensure that means of livelihood ensured for all, to have equal pay for men and women, to have the right to work, education, public assistance, also just and human conditions at work. Maternity benefit is also part of your DPSP. And if you can look into the subsequent relevance in the present time, we have some provisions. For example, say for the maternity benefit provision, we have the Maternity Benefit Act. We have some of the safety provisions in the Factories Act, right? So that is why we have to understand that as we go along, we have the constitutional provisions also. But at the end of the day, we have to understand that labor and the regulation of the same is actually falling under the concurrent list. And that is why, if you understand, the center and the states originally previously had around 44 plus more laws when we talk about the regulation and the monitoring of labor in the country. But at the end of the day, it was becoming very complex. So the government of India tried to consolidate in 4 codes. But at the end of the day, we have also seen that since it is a concurrent subject, the state governments have to have some ground regulations to enforce this code at the factories and the establishments, which is also very, very weak as of now. The reason of which we will actually explore a little more into this topic. Now, when we have these fundamental rights, how come we have such direct fundamental rights or say provisions or some references regarding working conditions, regarding men and women, equal pay, and all of those provisions? Because we have the same as background when we talk about the trade union history. Now, when we talk about the timeline from around 1908, we see that labor right movement has been very, very instrumental in shaping the face of the modern Indian history. Now, we start with the Bombay Mill Strike. I am sure all of you have actually read about this, where Bal Gangadhar Tilak actually tried to develop trade movement, for the first time in the country. Also, in 1918, we also saw the rise of the Madras Labour Union, India's first union with regular membership. Also in 1920, a very major event, for example, say the All India Trade Union Congress was set up as India's first national, wide-ranging national body, where also we had the inclusion of Lala Lajpat Rai, N.M. Joshi, and all of those important stalwarts. In 1921, the Buckingham and Carnatic Mills case was a kind of a setback, because the colonial administration, they struck very heavily with illegal action. Also, when we go on in the same year, N.M. Joshi came up with a resolution calling for the protection of the trade unions, because the trade unions back then was the common voice of the working class. And back then, there were lots of working class working at mills, factories, employing a lot of children, women, and obviously men, and they had very, very miserable conditions. Some of them were also sent up abroad to work in plantations as indentured labor. Also, we know that they are kind of forced labor. So all of these were culminated in this kind of labor right movements. And in fact, in 2021 or 2022 mains, there was also a question regarding the 1920s decades and how this decade was very, very crucial for the labor movement and overall other kind of revolutions too. So writing good answers will obviously need your skills with reference to some good references and examples. Now, when we move on, Trade Union Act of 1926 perhaps is the most important legal provision back then, because union got legal recognition for the first time, so that the workers could organize, they could try to negotiate with the owners with reference to some wage, working conditions, working hours and everything. So for the first time, the labor in the country was seeing the light of the day. They were getting protection from the criminal conspiracy, because most often the colonial police and the administration used to label the protesters as illegal people trying to disrupt the production processes and hence impacting the economy. So this was seen as a criminal conspiracy. So that is how this act was enacted after a long course of deliberations with Congress people and also the various leaders in trade unions back then. And growing on, this act could not quell the various miseries that the labor at that time was facing. Why? Because in 1928, you see that the mobilization of the workforce was growing over a period of time. You have seen, for example, the Girne Kamgar Union, which was growing rapidly, and that is when, if a lot of workers, they try to organize and demand some collective rights. So the business people back then was very angry. They were upset with the colonial administration, and mostly these factories and the owners of them were from Britain, and that is where a state and business nexus was brought in. And also we have seen after that a tumultuous time wherein we saw the Meerut conspiracy case. In the comments you let me know who were involved, in which year this happened. Also the same you do with trade disputes bill. Also then we had the public safety bill, which actually had a lot of restrictions on public movement. Supposedly after the same, we have seen how Lala Lajpat Rai suffered death at the hands of police, which angered also Bhagat Singh and rest of his revolutionary friends. So we have seen how labor movement is deeply tied with the Indian national struggle. After that, we have also seen how Dr. B.R. Ambedkar stepped in the scenario. From 1942 to 46, we have seen how his vision would change the labor dynamics, because for the first time he founded the Independent Labour Party in 1937, and his stance with reference to labor was very inspired by Karl Marx's words and also his own independent research, that it is not only about the wages we are talking about. We are talking about the dignity. We are talking about the liberation of the caste system, which were also prevalent at factories back then. Also political participation of the working class. He focused on bringing all of them, because he believed that labor must enter the affairs of politics and find a solution beyond simple trade unionism. And that is why, he brought in so many reforms back in 1940s. Just imagine, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was so far of his time that he also talked about DNS allowance, employee state insurance, even maternity benefits. Also the same things that we find nowadays. For example, with reference to some coal areas or mining areas, you also see some trust set up by the government, so that this trust would manage the profits from the mining activities, the local people. So back then, he also proposed the same for mica mine workers. He talked about setting up employment exchanges so that people would find some jobs easily via newspapers, via so many other aspects. Also, we have to understand that he also set up tripartite labor conference, labor investigation committee, and also he talked about compulsory union recognition, right? And directly and indirectly later on, when the constitution was being framed, his ideas and inspirations were also reflected in the various DPSPs, as you can actually understand, right? Also, when we talk about the inclusion of the labor in concurrent list, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar warned, right, that without central legislation, the different provinces, right now we have the states, right, they would enact their own different sets of labor laws, right? And that is where, this 4 labor laws or the codes right now is actually inspired by his vision back then, so that we can have a national labor code regulating the various aspects. Because back then, from say pre-independence time to even post-independence times, we had so many different laws. We had more than 44 plus laws regarding labor, and that was one of the main reasons as to why India suffered in the manufacturing journey. You have seen, you have understood that we have kind of skipped manufacturing when we talk about India's economic growth, right? But at the end of the day, we have to understand these were the many laws, apart from many other laws also, which impacted India from actually having a good manufacturing base, because these were very restrictive laws. These were actually enacted by different states in different provisions. So different states were having different divergences in so many laws. With reference to that, that is why many of them were subsumed in the labor codes. Back in 2018-19, UPSC, maybe in 17, UPSC actually asked that which of the laws were subsumed under GST regime. There can also be a question as to which were the laws which were subsumed under the 4 labor codes. So it is very important for us to understand this. So please do refer to this from your handouts. Now, what we have to talk about, for example, so the Maternity Benefit Act, the Industrial Disputes Act, the Factories Act. So these were all the acts which regulated the working conditions, which were kind of consolidated in the 4 codes. These codes were extensively covered in the Analyst before. Set up by the recommendations of the Sachar Committee in 2002, we finally came up with the laws with reference to these 4 simplified codes. If you see, the 4 codes are having various provisions. For example, the Code on Wages is talking about payment of wages, equal remuneration. Recently in the Analyst, I also talked about the recent Noida protests, right? And how the Minimum Wage Act was actually subsumed under this code, and why this was causing a lot of concerns between the wage revisions of Haryana government and the UP government, right? So this replaced 4 laws. Industrial Relations Code replaced 3 laws and many other laws too, right? Where we are talking about the industrial dispute, the strikes, all of the provisions regarding mass casual leave, right? Also, we are talking about the Social Security Code, where we are talking about giving social security benefits such as maternity benefit, right? Also talking about social security benefits and extending the benefits to the gig or the platform workers, creating welfare boards for unorganized workers, right? Also, finally, we have this Occupational Safety, Health and Working Conditions Code, where we are talking about how the workers would be safe at the factories. But the thing is that, the 4 codes were actually passed way back in 2019-2020. Back then, I remember that the newspapers were publishing extensively how the labor law will be changing the country and bringing in, attracting in investments. But as of now, if you have seen, it was only implemented way in November 2025. So if you see, this gap of 5 years almost was taken by the state governments to come up with their own sets of provisions under this code. Because if you can still remember, we have labor under the concurrent list, where at the ground level, the state government has to come up with their own laws, rules or various other regulations to actually regulate the factories and the working. So that is where we have to understand that this took a lot of time to actually reflect. Now, what are the key changes under the codes? Now, this from here, we will try to have some understanding of the issues of the codes also. For example, say if a factory would fire some workers, right? So the new code is telling that if there are 300 or more workers, the factory would require the permission of some government official. It has to consult with the various officials at the factory level, the state level, district level, right? So generally, large firms, large factories, large MSMEs, industries, they have a formal rule in place to fire workers. If that factory is employing around 299 workers or less, they would require no such conditions. They can easily let go of some worker. They do not need any government permissions. So that means that we are trying to protect, as of now in the latest codes, only those big factories and the workers working in those big factories, right? Also, if you can understand, the strike notice period has been increased to 60 days, right? So sudden strikes, which are known as flash strikes with very little notice, Maybe the workers are realizing, okay, the working conditions is going way beyond inhuman conditions. So in that condition, the workers must be giving 60 days of notice, because flash strikes are totally prohibited. In fact, if you can also understand this layoff rule of 300 workers, it was actually back in 1982, it was actually 300. Right? Later, after a mass firing, the government actually reduced it to 100 workers. And right now, again, it has been increased to 300. Now, if you look at various other provisions also, which you can also write as issues of these codes. Firstly, when we talk about the factories with power, I mean running with electricity or any mechanical power here, right? So, with reference to some smaller units, right? With reference to the application of these codes, it has been actually understood that the factory is working without power, and the number of workers, say here, a minimum of 40 workers has to be there in the factory to be actually have this code enforced on those factories themselves, right? So you can understand that the working conditions under the Factory Act and equivalent provisions, they would only be enforced if there are more than 40 workers in factories which are working without formal mechanized powers. What about those small enterprises where there are only 2 or 3 workers? What about the enforceability of the codes on these factories? Also, industrial inspections earlier used to be unannounced and independent. So factory inspectors would come and inspect. Right now it is randomized, and it may also violate the ILO convention number 81 on independent inspections, because independent inspections are very important for transparency. Also, strike during reconciliation earlier used to be restricted. Right now it is banned, right? Also, there is a 60 days buffer. And also, the gig and the platform workers are not covered at all. Only the Social Security Code is mentioning welfare, but they are not referring them as employees, right? Some recognition has been given, but not overall. Also, in the month of April, we have seen, I have also covered this before in the Analyst, that the Noida garment factory workers went on protest because the Haryana government announced that, okay, there will be a wage increase. The UP government did not, and that is why the Noida workers, they started protesting. And this is not a, rare thing that we are seeing. This is a very common thing, that in the states, there is an intense interstate wage competition. For example, any particular state would love to keep their wages lower so that they attract more foreign investors and domestic investors, so that they can set up factories in that particular state. So the wage goes to the bottom, because the investors would always like lower wages to set up their factories in a particular state. The state government would love to keep their wages lower. So it is a kind of a race to the bottom that we are seeing, and that is why we need a national binding wage, right? Also, recently we have seen in 2026, April 14th, that a high pressure steam actually of more than 600 degrees Celsius, it ruptured, killing 20 workers who were having lunch at this factory in Chhattisgarh. And that is not a isolated event in Chhattisgarh. In the last 3 years, there have been around 300 industrial deaths. And most of them, the workers sometimes do not even get proper full compensation, because they were only contract workers. And if you can look at the data with reference to labor industry and the various other Ministry of Labor data, there have been more than 3,000 factory deaths in India. It is up to around 2020. That means 3 workers are dying every day. 14 imprisoned under Factories Act because maybe they were protesting, they were calling after strikes. So that is where, if you see, these are the data which you can use in your mains answers to actually emphasize the exploitation of the workers with reference to their working conditions. Now, let us come to another issue here, gig worker. Gig workers, if you can understand, the composition of the people working at Swiggy, Zomato, Blinkit, for example, recently Raghav Chadda also visited. On a popular YouTube video, if you have watched it, let me know in the comments below. He actually had a night out with a Blinkit delivery professional, right? And he explored so many issues that he was facing. So that is where, if you understand, the gig economy and the people working under the gig economy, it is only increasing over a period of time. And also you understand that as of 2022 and 2024 reports, Delhi's gig economy has doubled in 3 years. Now 17% of India's gig economy, right? And also if you can understand, India has around, as of formal records, 1 crore workers. It will actually grow in the next 3-4 years. So as of now, India, according to Niti Aayog, is having 7.7 crore workers. According to other estimates, that number is actually quite higher at 15 million workers. Now, the word gig economy, platform or gig does not appear even once in the industrial code of 2020. Only they are classified as independent contractors legally. Right? Also, we have seen that the Code of Social Security is proposing a welfare fund to be set up for the gig workers. But at the end of the day, it has not been extended as an employment status. Still, the people who are working in the gig economy, they are not actually full-time employees. They will be paid according to the number of deliveries that they do and the number of work, number of hours that they work. There is no simple base salary that they are paid. Now, in India, there is actually a growing amount of awareness between the state governments. So the states of Rajasthan, Karnataka, Telangana, Jharkhand, they have come up with their own labor laws. And labor laws regarding especially gig economy. Also, according to 2024 private report, none of the 11 major big gig platforms, including Swiggy, Zomato and all of them, right? They did not recognize the workers organizing as a trade union, except the state of Telangana, who recognized a workers union for gig and platform economy. And also Indian Federation of App-Based Transport Workers has a WhatsApp community for their actual convenience. And that is why we have seen, that is why right now so many MPs in recent times, they are getting sympathetic with the workers. Also, if you have seen, the Zomato in 2024 called back their veg only or pure veg delivery modules, because it was alleged that many of the minority sections of the population, they were facing discrimination when they were actually delivering the veg product to some customer, and the customer was declining that they would not take the veg delivery from any other community. So that was also a thing, and that is how the Zomato also rolled out that particular provision. Now, when we talk about the initiatives that the government has taken over a period of time, we have seen that we have a portal known as eShram portal, where there are right now more than 30 crore registrations and identities given to them as an unique ID, accident insurance, welfare scheme regulation is given. Also, another separate scheme known as PM Swanidhi 2020 is giving microcredit scheme to the workers, recognizing some of the street vendors as workers, giving them credit so that they could actually recover from the COVID pandemic. Also, we have the Manrega, which is given unskilled work. Right now, it is known as the VVG Ramji Bill, an act which has also been designated. We are talking about the pre-2026 act here, which actually gave previously 100 days of work. Right now, in the comment section, you let me know what all the updates have taken place under the Manrega Act. Next, we have a very important scheme as also a maternity benefit aspect in the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana, which was also inspired by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar legacy, where we are giving 6,000 rupees as cash transfer to the pregnant and the lactating woman. Also, when we talk about the Ayushman Bharat, it is actually a health insurance scheme. Apart from this, the Shram Shveda portal, it is a kind of a unified portal for the employers so that they actually comply with the labor laws and regulations. Apart from that, for employment and skilling purposes, we also have the National Career Service portal. We also have the scheme under the safety campaigns which are launched by the Directorate General of Factory Advice Service and labor institutes, which actually carry on various campaigns. Under the same, we also have various labor institutions for the welfare of labor in the country. For example, earlier we had the Indian Labour Conference, which is right now not convened since 2015. Also, apart from that, we also have the Chief Labour Commissioner working for the overall welfare, National Safety Council working for the inspection of the various safety incidents. We also have the Employees Provident Fund organization, which more than 6.5 crore active subscribers. Employee State Insurance Corporation, wherein health insurance is also provided. And at the end of the day, we also have the Shram Shvida portal, as also we have seen before. Now, on this May Day, what would be the best practical outcome of all these discussions right now? Firstly, we have to understand we need a peaceful labor force for a peaceful and prosperous India and a Viksit Bharat by 2047. And that is where we have to understand and take some way forward. Firstly, let us revive the Indian labor confidence to bring up labor issues at the national level. We have to define proper rights for the gig and the platform workers in the code directly. We have to also lower the union recognition threshold. And there is also provision in this code that you need 51% agreement of the workers to set up a union in one factory, for example, according to the latest code. So we have to lower these thresholds so that we can have more workers organizing union in a very peaceful format, obviously, with reasonable restrictions according to our constitution. Also, when we talk about national minimum wage, there has to be one at a binding level. There should not be varying wages according to the state governments, and that is where these protests can also decline. Also, we have to bring in contract labor regulation at a strict level. Mandatory safety audits for high-risk plants must be devised so that to prevent various industrial accidents. And at the end of the day, the ESIC and the EPFO, they should be covering more of the informal workers and do many more campaigns, because at the end of the day, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's labor reforms way back in 1942 are still yet to be realized. So let us actually practice this as a question. You can post me the answer in the comments below. After that, we will move on to the next article. Coming here to another social issue, because recently the Supreme Court has delivered a very, very important verdict, and potentially a verdict that can lead to an amendment in your Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act. So let us understand what the case was all about. Firstly, understand why this topic is important. From prelims perspective, we need to understand the laws and mechanisms of our Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act. For GS1 and GS2, social justice issues are very important. For governance also, we need to understand how the government of India should be trying to govern this landscape. And at the end of the day, for GS4, ethical dimensions, particularly women dimensions, must be explored. Now, in the very beginning, let us start from absolute basics again. When we talk about abortion, abortion is the deliberate ending of pregnancy. As simple as that. Before the fetus can actually survive outside the womb. In here, you can understand this is a development of the fetus. And the number of weeks, if you can see, these are all the gestational period. Starting from week 9, it is actually one of the first periods where we can understand that the fetal stage begin of a unborn child, right? Gradually, if you can go on, you see that organs, fingers, lungs, hearing, brain development, muscles, bones, and finally full development is achieved in 40 weeks of a child. Now, there have been, traditionally various debates on whether abortion should be legal or not. In India, it was not legal before 1971. It was illegal. Just understand, something which was illegal back then is legal right now because of the progressive movements and the efforts of the millions and millions of people who fought for this right. Because in Indian legal language, abortion is still not a right that you can absolutely claim, but it is a right that you can use on only some conditions, on only fulfilling some medical standards by which you can terminate that particular pregnancy. So, MTP Act is not about using abortion as a right. It is actually about regulating abortions in a safe way, because sometimes in cases of unwanted pregnancies, people become very afraid. They do not go to some practitioner of medicine. They do not follow the medicines. They do not follow the operations that medically must be done. Otherwise, it can threaten the life of a woman. And that is why, to regulate it, we actually came up with this act. Earlier, if it was illegal due to various issues such as selective sex abortion, because mainly in many parts of India we have seen before how families only wanted son. That is the meta-son preference. After that, it was actually quite prevalent in the states of Haryana, especially Rajasthan, where many sex selective abortions were taking place, because back then daughters were seen as a burden. Right now it has been regulated strictly, and only safe and medically regulated abortions are done right now under the recommendation of the Santilal Shah committee recommendation, which actually was the main background of this act. And in 1971 this act was enacted for the first time. Now back then, the gestational period was a main thing of this act, because up to 12 weeks if a woman would go abortion, they would require the opinion of one registered doctor. For abortions going to the period of 12 to 20 weeks, opinions of two doctors were recommended, and beyond 20 weeks, abortion was not allowed. And it was not allowed up to 2021, when this cap restriction was lifted. Right? Now, what were the grounds actually under the 1971 Act? Firstly, abortions cannot be done for any and whatsoever purposes. Firstly, if there is some risk to life and physical health of a woman, then only abortion could be done. Then, if there are some distress caused by unwanted pregnancy on mental health, it could be allowed. Fetal abnormalities, if the child that would be born, that child could not live a proper dignified life and with a serious handicap, then abortions were also allowed. In cases of rape and sexual assault, unwanted pregnancies were actually treated as mental injury, also a ground. Contraceptive failure, right? Also only for married women. Back then it was a norm. And finally, socioeconomic factors. For example, number of existing children and some other things were also taken into consideration, but it was actually changed in 2021 amendment. For the first time after 71, the act was changed in 2021, where the gestational period was revised dramatically and drastically, where throughout the entire abortion process, the consent, the permission of husband and partner is not required. In-laws not required. Only the pregnant woman, and maybe in some cases the family, immediate family of the woman would be the main aspiration here. Also, with reference to the gestational period, if you can understand, 0 to 20 weeks right now, it is the norm that only one registered doctor and their advice should be taken only if there is some risk to life, mental, physical health of the woman. Also in cases of some abnormal fetus and failure of contraception, which is right now also extended to unmarried women. Now these are all the changes which we did in 2021. So this is reflecting that Indian society actually took some time to come to terms with modern ideas. Also, 20 to 24 weeks of gestational period, you need two registered doctors' advice, and only for special categories. So not everyone can do abortion in this bracket. Only the survivors of rape or incest, minors, or if a woman has changed their marital status to widowed or divorcees, then only it would be applicable also on the women with disabilities and emergencies or disaster cases. So these were the regulated conditions. And at the end of the day, in case abortion needs to be done beyond 24 weeks, state medical board has to come up with expert regulations, because by this time the fetus has actually developed a lot, if you can understand, right? So the very slim line between fetus and a newborn child is very, very blurred in these timeline. And that is why only if there are substantial fetal abnormalities, then only that particular woman can actually get abortion. This is very important for the discussion right now. And also one more thing is that the privacy of the woman is very important. Throughout the entire process, no one can disclose the name, identity of the women who are going abortion. Now, let us understand in detail what happened in this April 2026 case. There is a 15-year-old minor rape survivor girl. Just understand the situation. Just imagine what the girl must have faced during this particular tragic incident in her life. Right now, she is standing at 7.5 months of pregnancy, which is well beyond the 24-week limit, right? If you can remember. And that girl attempted suicide twice at the age of 15, just because she was embarrassed and she is facing the mental trauma herself. Now, the girl and her family applied for abortion. This case went up to AIMS, Delhi. And now, the AIMS Delhi is recommending that abortion cannot be done because, firstly, the girl is 15 years old. You know, in cases of this kind of complicated abortion, there can be significant harm to the life of the girl first. Second, the doctors are finding right now in their medical study that the child inside her womb, the unborn child, the fetus, if we can see that, it is almost developed. The doctors are telling that if we abort right now, it is like that we are having an indirect delivery because that child would live. The child has reached to this condition that it has developed quite a bit. On the other hand, the girl and her family do not want the same. That is where the Supreme Court intervened. The AIMS and the medical professionals, they are telling that this abortion cannot be done due to this kind of risks. But the Supreme Court told that the 2021 amendment, which has this time limits for various gestational period, must be removed in cases of rape survivors. The act needs to be amended to give flexibility to the rape survivors. Supreme Court told in their judgments, if you can see, these are the quotes from the judgment directly, that a minor child cannot be forced to bear a pregnancy just because AIMS is telling that firstly, the child cannot actually bear those kind of pain and the fetus would be kind of fully developed by the time abortion is done. Because the government is being requested right now to amend the law. Because when there is some pregnancy due to rape, etc., time limitation should not be there. Unwanted pregnancy cannot be thrust on one person. Imagine that she is a child right now. She is studying right now. Supreme Court is telling, how can I deliver this judgment by looking at her face in case of this particular event? So, the Supreme Court told that reproductive autonomy and mental health goes alongside the same. On the other hand, AIMS is telling that termination of this particular pregnancy in this case will not be a conventional or normal abortion, but will result into a viable child, which is right now unborn, that will be prematurely delivered into the world. So the AIMS is telling that let us go on with the delivery. The child can be placed for adoption, but the family is not agreeing to the same, and Supreme Court is actually supporting the family's decision. Family do not want delivery, and that is why the Supreme Court is telling that Medical Termination of Pregnancy Act cannot be refused on the grounds of these gestational periods, especially for rape survivors. And it clarified that you are AIMS, you are only assigned a medical advisory role. You give all the advice to the parents, let the parents take the decision at the end of the day. And this is where the Supreme Court is reflecting that, okay, right to life under Article 21 would be actually be hurt if we force this 15-year-old child to deliver right now, because it is going against your body autonomy, right to health and dignity, also going against right to equality, because if someone is denying MTP to rape survivors while others who are actually, if you see, others means others who are beyond this 24-week only under substantial fetal abnormalities, they are getting it, but rape survivors are not getting it because they can get only after 24 weeks, right? So this is what is going against your fundamental rights. It is going against discrimination, right? And that is why if you see right to privacy also, which was accorded under the Puttaswamy judgment, which actually can be stretched to this case in recognizing the right to make reproductive choices is also under right to privacy. So this means that protection of children in this case, plus all these kind of fundamental rights should go hand in hand. Also, if you look at other landmark cases, in 2009, Supreme Court clarified for the first time that linked reproductive choice to fundamental rights. So under Article 21, women have this kind of rights, also especially women with mental illness. Because of this burden to carry her pregnancy, it was also well recognized. In 2016, Supreme Court also held that time limits, the strict time limits, is not universally applicable to all of them. All of them will have different conditions. Also, if you see in 2022, we also had a case in which Supreme Court told that unmarried women have the same right to safe and legal abortion as married women. So that is how some of the rules of the MTP were struck down as unconstitutional. And extension of this 20 to 24 week of delivery and termination of pregnancy was extended to unmarried women too. Now, there are other related laws also. For example, say in this kind of case where there is a minor girl who has been raped, that particular case also falls under the POSCO Act, which is a gender neutral act, right? And below 18 years, any kind of sexual activity, pornography, sexual harassment is totally abolished, totally banned, totally restricted, and also punishable with maximum of death penalty too. Right? For this act specifically, we have some special codes, mandatory reporting. Apart from this, we also have various BNS provisions which reflect IPC. Also, with reference to this, if you see some rape cases, rape of minor below 12 years. So there are so many provisions for the protection of the same. Supreme Court also told that this case here, the accused property and everything should be sold off with reference to the relief of the victim right now. Also, we have the Preconception and Prenatal Diagnostic Techniques Act, which totally bans sex selective abortion. It is actually going against this established practice of female feticide in India. So that is where we see there are some other issues also. For example, in many states, medical boards are not yet constructed. Also, according to WHO, India attributes to 13% of the maternal deaths in the country. Why? Because they go actually for unsafe abortions. The MTP services of abortion are not well established in rural areas. They are only found in urban areas. There is a stigma around abortion. Also, if you see that across the various state governments, right, if you see the facilities that offer post-abortion care, not only abortion but post-abortion care is actually quite inadequate. Also, people do not approach them for religious or social reasons. Lack of trained staff, right? Also, if you see in the southern India, right, there are some states which actually show highly sophisticated medically aborted pregnancies. So if you see that there is an increase in abortions in southern India, so it also have to be understood how well is the medical facilities of those particular states, right? We also have to understand that girls who actually undergo this kind of abortions, they face double trauma, especially with reference to some rape, plus the entire abortion process. Also, the fast track courts are backlogged. There are so many cases. And at the end of the day, institutions also resist this abortion orders. For example, say in this particular case, earlier Supreme Court actually gave the green light for abortion, but AIIMS actually challenged that in front of Supreme Court. So sometimes government institution, they also resist the same. And at the end of the day, poor awareness is also there. Now, there have been so many measures that the government has taken for safe abortion, for awareness creation avenues. But at the end of the day, we have to expand medical abortion, not only via pills and everything, but access through Asha workers and Jan Aushadhi Kendras, where women workers, women Sakhis must be there at this one-stop center known as Sakhi Kendras, and centers should be equipped with more funds. Also, medical boards in all states should be mandated because many states do not have functional medical boards. So it must be made a national agenda. Also, recently, the Supreme Court's directions must be adhered to. For rape survivors, this gestational period must be removed. Now, we need more trained professionals at the end of the day, and also some more concrete awareness standards, because India is part of the CEDAW. UN CEDAW is this universal and international commitment for women's rights. We have also ratified the UN CRC. We follow the Sustainable Development Goals, wherein the goal number 3 and 5 directly go in supporting the women development and everything. So that is where we have to understand that this is a pressing debate, and at the end of the day we have a mains practice question for all of you. Please do practice this and let me know what is the answer in the comments below. Now we'll be moving on to the simplified topics for prelims. The Ministry of Road Transport and Highways have come up with a new set of regulations for monitoring the various amount of infrastructure that is going on in the country, especially under the HAM model. So let us understand firstly what are the various types of infrastructural models which are practiced in country. Firstly, we will start with engineering, procurement and construction. Now all of these types are very crucial for your mains examination and also for your prelims examination, because there are lots of new projects which are coming up right now, and this kind of infographics can actually help you effectively summarize your revision at a very faster level. So let us start with EPC, wherein if for example there is a bridge construction taking place, the government of India will be fully giving the money to whom? To the private people. The private contractor will be building the bridge, and here the entire risk is actually with the government, because infrastructural projects are actually very huge projects, and any huge project is actually susceptible to various risks. So the entire risk is actually borne by the government of India or government of state, if at all some state governments are doing this kind of infrastructural projects. Also, with reference to BOT, that is a build, operate and transfer. Here the private player will be building the project. It will be operating the project, for example, a toll on a highway. So whatever the cost that the private sector has incurred in building this road, in constructing this road, it will try to levy a toll and collect the charges for a specific number of years, during which the entire cost would be recovered, and at the end the ownership will be transferred back to the government. And generally we have various highways and expressways where this kind of thing is already done. Also, BOT is a build, operate, transfer annuity model. So based on this, the private player will be building the project. It will be operating again for a fixed number of time, and the government will be paying a fixed percentage of money annually. And here that is why there will be no toll connection, right? So finally the risk will be staying with the government here, because the government is actually paying for this particular model. Now apart from this, we also have the toll operate transfer. Toll operate transfer means, and again at the end of the day, private people are building this bridge or say road, and the private player will be paying a lump sum of money directly to the government, right? And then to recover this particular cost that it has paid to the government, it will be placing a toll, and this toll will be paid by us if we are using this road, and this is why the risk will be with the private person. And there are some kind of special projects which need attention. For example, say there is a bridge which is coming up, say in a Nakshal affected area. So definitely private players will not be interested in constructing a bridge there in that location, because it is very risky for the private persons, firstly to take a loan from the bank, then to go and build a bridge there, which can be disrupted by the Nakshal operators. And that is where here a very clever arrangement is done on a financial level. Government will be paying 60% money, remaining 60% money will be actually paid as annuity to the private sector over and over the time. So here the private sector can access these funds from the banks and various other players, right? And it will be operating for a fixed period. Government will be paying these annual percentages. So the risk is kind of shared between the private and the government. And at the end of the day, we also have some models which operate on the Swiss challenge. Swiss challenge is, for example, say imagine there is a very big desert area where company A is going and telling that, okay, I will be building a solar farm, and I will be building at a cost of around 900 crores, and I will be charging around 3 rupees per unit after I build this farm. Now there is a company B who is telling that I will be building it in again 900 crores maybe, but I will be charging only 2 rupees per unit. of electricity by solar energy. So naturally the government would invite bidder B, right, the person, company B, to have that solar farm constructed on that desert area. Now, in the Swiss challenge, what happens? The government will tell A that, okay, see, B has presented this offer. So, can you match this 2 rupees per unit? If yes, then the contract will be going to A. If not, the contract will be going to B. So, it is actually enabling the private companies to have more innovation and cost cutting. And at the end of the day, the infrastructural projects are done in a very safe way. Now, for your exam purposes, at the end, there is a risk profile. So based on the MCQs, they can give you that, okay, arrange these models in order of their risks. So please have a look at that also. Now recently, the Ministry of Road Transport and Highway came up with a new regulation. It has been seen over a period of few years that the projects under HAM, where the government is contributing substantial 40% money, right? So these projects are not implemented well by the private people, because in the news, we often see that a bridge has collapsed, flyover has collapsed, underpass has collapsed, embankment due to various river activities, they are not done properly, pavements are not maintained properly, infrastructure with reference to various big projects and construction activities, they also get disrupted, tunnel collapse happen, people sometimes get trapped for more than 72 hours. In the comments, you can let me know actually which Indian states saw these in the recent times, right? Also, the pavement quality concrete is not of good level. So that is why the government is right now taking strict actions. This action is only taken under the EPC project. What is this? That whatever would be the private company in some project would be, right? They must be having a record of their catastrophic failure, a record of their past activities, construction of the last 2 years. If the government will see that they had this kind of results, right, they would be totally be banned to get any funds under the HAM contract. Their tenders would not be accepted at all, right? And that is where, we are actually going with safety provisions. So people, or say private companies, who will be finding guilty with reference to these kind of projects, faulty projects, they would be disqualified. They will be giving minus 30 marks in evaluation, automatically disqualifying them. They will also have to pay penalties, blacklistment, right, debarment, termination, everything. So that company will not be having a good image. So for your mains examination, you have to keep in mind that in this last 3 years, there have been 67 such projects which face these kind of issues. And that is why we are coming up with more quality parameters apart from speed parameters. We need quality infrastructure, not speedy projects which will collapse very soon. And that is where, if you understand, India has been following this model of infrastructural growth over a period of time. So we need more accountability in this public-private partnerships. Now for your reference, I have attached some ways in which infrastructural development in India has evolved from an Harad-Domar model to Nehru-Mahalanobis model to finally the model that we are seeing right now, where we are getting so many investments in cases of public investment, private, FIIs, FDIs, INVETS and NIIF, that is a National Investment Infrastructure Fund. In the comment section, can anyone tell me, with reference to the INVETS and the REITs, so who are the main regulators for these two agencies? So since prelims is approaching soon, this kind of questions are very popular among the UPSC examiners. Now let us move on to the next question and the next topic. So the Great Nicobar Island is again in the news. It is very important for us to revise the basic information regarding this particular project, because according to our military experts, this project located in this Andaman Island chain and finally in the Nicobar Island, this is very important for our national security and strategic purposes. Firstly, for your mapping purposes, it is very to understand the location of the Andaman Islands and the Nicobar Islands, right? Also, if you understand, these two are roughly separated by 11-degree channel, right? Now, can anyone in the comments let me know which is a channel which is actually separating effectively the Andaman Islands and the Nicobar Islands. 11-degree channel is kind of running between the Andaman and the Little Andaman channels. Also, if you see, the Port Blair is actually located in the Andaman, not the Nicobar Island. Also keep in mind that the Barren Island, which is India's only volcano, is located in this particular Andaman Island chain. Where at the north, if you see, there is a Saddle Peak. If you go south, if you also see the Sentinel Island located in the Andaman sides. And finally, in the Nicobar Islands, if you see, this is the Great Nicobar Island where this project is actually being held. Also, if you can look into the location of the Andaman Island and compare it to South Asia, that is India, and Southeast Asia, it is just located in between. It is located, in fact, more closer to the Southeast Asian countries rather than India, right? In the comment section, you let me know which Indian city is more closer to the Andaman Islands. It is Chennai or Kolkata. Also, you let me know the Andaman Nicobar Islands, which is sharing maritime borders with Indonesia, Myanmar and Thailand. Between them, who is more closely located to the Andaman Islands. You have to also keep in mind that this entire stretch is very rich in biodiversity because 95% is tropical rainforest. It is also part of the Sundaland biodiversity hotspot. In the comment section, can anyone let me know who are one of the most top species facing critical threats of extinctions located in the Sundaland biodiversity hotspot and also in the Andaman Islands and the Nicobar Islands. Now, in 2018, there is a question regarding the mapping aspect of this island, right? Firstly, it is asking regarding the Barren Island, and also they are asking regarding the geographical proximity of these countries to the Great Nicobar Island. So they can actually ask you individually with reference to these islands also. Let me know what is the answer in the comments below. Now let us go on to understanding the main details. So here we have the entire Great Nicobar Island here. So at this north, if you see, again for the mapping purposes only, we have the Campbell Bay National Park. In the middle, we have the Galathea National Park, and the majority of the project is actually coastal projects. Here we have the transshipment port, international airport, power plant. Earlier it was a coal power plant which was proposed. Right now it is coming up as a gas or solar based. And also we will be having housing facilities for around 3.5 lakh people. Why? Because the current population is 8,000 right now, and if we have more of this transshipment port, international airport, we will have more people working in this island, more tourists who will be coming up, right, needing power facilities and everything. So at a cost of 92,000 crore as of 2026, this project will be coming up, implemented by the Andaman and Nicobar Island Integrated Development Corporation. Now, what are the main strategic benefits? Because recently the National Green Tribunal has given the green light to this Great Nicobar Island, because for national security it has been accorded as a very important one. Because this idea of having this entire strategic projects on our national islands here is not new, because it was floated back in 1970s, after which it was struck due to national emergency. Now, if you see, the state of Malacca, Sunda and Lombok is strategically located here, through which almost majority of the world trade passes by. Also, China is very closely located nearby. China sometimes sends ships, vessels near our islands here. So to protect them, we need our investments and military progress in this particular region. Also, we have a new upcoming facility in the Coco Islands of Myanmar, where China is the main investor there. So they can have their military facilities. Why not us? If we have our own, floating aircraft carrier, as it is also talked of by some experts. It is also closely aligned with our Act East policy, because the transshipment portal and the international airport can also link effectively with the Southeast Asian countries. And also, since we are actually having an active free trade agreement, more trade can happen. And also, there is a chance of a very big oil discovery in this region to exploit the same. Now, despite the same, we have so many concerns with reference to biodiversity, the uprootment of the tribal sections, where we have the Shompen tribal people living there, because environmental clearance was given way back in 2022, and there are so many allegations that their habitations are being uprooted, the local flora and fauna is being hurt with reference to this Niti Aayog Commission project. So in the comment section, you let me know what are the 2 and 3 species of turtles which are found, which are directly threatened by this project. Now, finally, we'll be moving on to the next article. Guys, recently in the news, we have seen so many tigers and their cubs dying away in the state of Madhya Pradesh, because there are some issues with reference to the carrying capacity of the tigers reserves in the state of Madhya Pradesh. So from this perspective, let us understand what is this all about. Firstly, if you look at the Project Tiger, right, which was implemented in 1973 as a tiger conservation project, because back then tiger was hunted extensively, indiscriminately, and the tiger population was going down. After implementing Project Tiger, which was actually a host of initiatives to boost tiger population, breeding grounds, gather data on them, and try to have scientific conservation of tigers in the country, approximately right now, as of 2022, we are having 3,682 tigers, with Madhya Pradesh having the highest tiger population in the entire country, followed by Karnataka, Uttarakhand, Maharashtra, and Tamil Nadu. So, Madhya Pradesh is actually also known as famously the tiger state of India. As of now, we have around 58 tiger reserves in the country, with the recent tiger reserve, the latest one, the 58th one, being in Madhya Pradesh itself. In the comment section, you should let me know which is the latest tiger reserve in the country in Madhya Pradesh. So, between 2014 and 2022, Madhya Pradesh has managed to increase the tiger population by a splendid growth of 155%. But still, this success is hurting Madhya Pradesh even more. Why? Because here we have to understand the concept of carrying capacity. So to understand the carrying capacity concept, firstly imagine all of the Madhya Pradesh tiger reserves, national park, and the forested areas in which tiger lives as our sample area. So in that area, there would definitely be some preys like deers and various other wild animals which the tiger would actually hunt for their life. Also, the tigers not only need the prey base, they also need the habitat quality. They need good trees, unpolluted rivers and ponds. Also, they need connectivity between the forested areas, because the tigers are not lazy people like us. They love roaming around in the nature. They are like the natural wanderers, right? They are like the natural tourists also in their own forest. They roam around the forests, right? So this means that for a tiger population to thrive, you need these 3 things: prey base, habitat quality, and wildlife corridors. Corridors which are unaffected. Say, there should not be any major road construction, there should not be any kind of tourist resort, there should not be any kind of road, bridge, or any kind of infrastructural projects, because the tigers otherwise would not go there. Because actually at the end of the day, while they're very fierce, they're also fearful of human activities, right? So that is why, if there are more projects coming up in Madhya Pradesh, if there are more human development happening there, right, in the case of so many projects, infrastructure, tigers won't actually go anywhere. They would actually stay in that forest itself, and that is why the prey base get limited. In a forest, in one particular tiger reserve, there is only limited prey, and if there is a limited prey, the tigers will be fighting among themselves. They will be moving out in the nearby villages, because a very interesting thing happens in the nearby villages. You know what happens there? Cattle herders and animal husbandry farmers, and sometimes farmers in general, they release their old and dry cattle nearby the tiger reserves, so that the tigers would come and kill their old and unproductive cattle. Just imagine, for their entire life, the cattle may have given the milk and what so not, right? At the end of the lives, instead of taking care of the cattle, they leave out in the jungles, and the tigers come out of the tiger reserves to actually eat that easy cattle. And this is a habit which is being developed, and the tigers are right now increasingly coming out of the jungles and right now in the forests and also in the villages, in the proper areas where people live. And if the tigers are coming out more in search of space and also in search of prey, that is leading to tiger and human conflict, right? Because of the huge amount of cattle which is being left abandoned, of the roads, railways, irrigation works, mining, deforestation activities, right? So this is where we see that these many tiger reserves and the tiger population there are facing firstly their own internal fighting between themselves, loss of prey, loss of habitat. Also, they are actually dying out, and their cubs, their little cubs, they are also dying out in the presence of these broken corridors because their entire presence is fragmented, right? And if you see, 47% of the tigers were linked to this livestock kills. Why? Because of the thing that we have just discussed right now, right? These old and dry cattle are being left out. More tigers are coming out in the villages and the nearby small towns, right? Many of you also have observed this in your villages, right? And at the end of the day, the farmers kill them because they stray into these areas. So what are the solutions here? Firstly, if you see, this is the overall tiger movement in eastern India. So firstly, we need to gather data over a long-term strategy. That data of the tigers must be tracked, where they are going and how they are interacting. So their corridors must be restored. The grasslands that we have depleted due to roads, construction and so on, they must be restored. And in the short term, we should be trying to monitor the tiger using cameras and satellites. The NTCA, National Tiger Conservation Authority, they must be giving more funding to the local tribal authorities, the local Gram Sabha, to have better conservation. And at the end of the day, the profit sharing must also be done with reference to some tourism projects, various other projects. The profit should be going on to the tiger conservation projects, right? Because in the recent times, there have been a lot of deaths in this particular fashion. Now, at the end, there are some ecological questions. To test your ecological knowledge, let me know in the answer what is the comments to these two questions. The government of India has cut down the windfall taxes on diesel and jet fuel exports. What are windfall taxes? These are those taxes which are levied by the government of India as special additional excise duty. So in official parlance, we do not use the term windfall taxes, we use this term. This term is only used as a special tax which is imposed on some companies which is having high amount of profits in a very short amount of time. Just imagine the scenario right now, the crude oil prices are actually very, very high. So Indian exporters can actually export a lot of crude oil to have more profits, right? So what happened? The government of India would not want a lot of crude oil in India to go abroad because simply we are facing a crude oil crisis right now. So to debar, to demotivate those exporters, we are using the windfall taxes to actually temporarily halting the exports of crude oil to have more reserves of crude oil and natural gas, liquefied petroleum gas in the country itself, right? So that is why, to prevent the global shocks impacting our Indian economy, we have also seen that as of now the government yet did not raise the prices of petrol or diesel, right? So this is why, since we have to maintain the price stability, the government actually levied this kind of high amount of prices of export based aviation turbine fuel or crude oil to keep them in India itself. And it was actually introduced in 2022 during the Russia-Ukraine crisis, where the same situation was having, where the oil marketing companies were profiting a lot due to increased prices of crude oil. So the government came in and taxed it. But in 2024 December, it was scrapped, it was lifted, because these kind of policies are only done during some intense economic activity on a global level. So these are temporary policies. Again, right now it has been imposed mainly to not let the aviation turbine fuel and the petrol and the diesel escape the country due to this West Asia crisis, right? So the latest update is that the diesel prices have been brought down, aviation turbine fuel have been brought down. On petrol, there is no such particular price rise due to the amount of rise in this windfall taxes. So the main domestic impact is that we need to have more fuel in India. We have to discourage excessive exports because we need to have more fuel in the country itself. Domestic supply must be there so that we can control inflation and we can manage public interest also during this kind of international shocks, because people right now are panic buying this kind of petrol. In some southern states, it has also been reported that lines are reported in most of the petroleum pumps. That is why the government is taking this kind of measures. So right now we have completed this and we will be going on to the final article of the day. The final article of the day is focusing on how the United Nations chief is being chosen. So from a prelims point of view, we have to keep in mind that the UN Secretary General and its election is happening right now. So let us understand why this is so important, because according to the UN Charter, which is their own constitution, it is appointed by the General Assembly, UN General Assembly, but only upon the recommendation of the United Nations Security Council, which actually plays a very important role by using its veto. So they would actually love their own candidate to be leading the United Nations, right? Because the UNSC will be holding closed door negotiations and deliberations within themselves, and also within themselves they will be doing this straw polls, informal voting between themselves, right? So it seems that right now it is a season of elections, right? It has to be also be noted that the prominent election has happened in India as of now. Also on the international level, this election is taking place. Now here the Secretary General is the Chief Administrative Officer of the UN. It manages the UN work, reports to the various organs, also appoints various personnel envoys, talks upon security, climate, peace, inequality and development in the entire world. That is why he is known as the chief diplomat of the entire world, right? And this is where you understand that the Security Council will be recommending a candidate. General Assembly will be appointing the candidate. As simple as that. This is the only process, right? So the term of this particular secretary will be discretionary, right? And also since 1981, this is not actually discretionary in process, but the Secretary General as of now so far, they have only served a maximum of only 2 terms according to their own internal convention. And this post rotates across regions. Regions like Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe, Western Europe and Latin America, and also Caribbean island nations. So the main debate right now before the new Secretary General would that as of now we are facing a financial crisis at the United Nations because of the mandatory assets contribution from the member states are going down in cases of so many conflicts which are going on. Also, the conflicts are leading to the paralysis within the UNSC. For example, this US, Israel and Iran conflict here, or the Russia-Ukraine conflict here, or various other international conflict has seen that the United Nations Security Council not take any proper action. So the Secretary General has to tactically navigate those things. Also, peacekeeping missions are on a compromise right now. Many conflicts are taking place in Sudan, in Ukraine. Humanitarian crisis is taking place. Still, peacekeeping forces are not going. Even the Sustainable Development Goals internationally, only 18% of the targets have been completed. And it is highly unlikely that by 2030, our targets will be completed. And at the end of the day, all of these nations want the United Nations to act properly. So that is why the entire world is actually waiting for a new Secretary General to lead them forward. Now, in the meantime, you attempt these questions in the comments below. Now, we have reached the end of the discussion. Till we meet again, all the best and best of luck. But do not forget to attempt the MCQs which are coming up. So, have a good day, all the best and best of luck. Thank you.